All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. We are here with the one and only Kevin Holt. He's a bit of a world traveler, he's an author. He's got some fascinating stories that we're going to talk about. One of them might even be about becoming a fake priest. I'm not quite sure what's happening here. But Kevin Holt, thank you very much for taking some time to spend with me today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you for that stellar introduction. Um, Introductions are always tricky because I'm not really sure what resonates most with whoever's listening to, but and what level I should talk about the who I am question.
True.
But most people want to know where you're from and all that. So I go with nationality. I'm a Swiss national, but have an American root system as well. My mom's American, dad was Swiss. And I've lived most of my life outside of the US. I lived in the US from the age of like 4 to 20, and then I've spent my adult life living in Spain, Japan, Taiwan, Switzerland for about 10 years, and I now live in Bali. So I like the term vagabonder. I'm
Oh, I
somewhat of
like
a
that.
vagabonder.
I
Um,
like it.
Took that from the book by Ralph Potts, Vagabonding. It's excellent.
Mm.
So yeah, I've been I'm someone who moves around a lot, nomadic creature, but slow travel. So I'll pick a place and I kind of stay there for probably way longer than I should, but that's how I travel. So people look at me like, "Oh, you're so well traveled," and I go, "Well, actually, I'm not that well traveled compared to a lot of people I know that have visited 100 countries or whatever." But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's such a great education. It seems to me that I know when I have traveled, I have not only found out a lot about the country that I'm traveling to, but I think I have more found about how ignorant I am or how the place where I'm from is different. It's weird how traveling can do that for you and almost be a great education. You must have had a fascinating upbringing traveling around so much.
It's a interesting thing that I discuss in my book a little bit, the idea of how to change perspective. And I mean, you can use the term ignorance if you want to, but it's just when you're in something, it's really hard to get a perspective on it until you exit it and you have a bird's eye view and you look at it from afar. And that's been the case for me because I did most of my schooling in the US system, although I was in back and forth to Switzerland. So I have some multicultural exposure. But it wasn't until I really left and got that bird's eye view that I got to see some of the things that I both appreciated about my host culture, or my home culture rather, and some of the things I became critical about. And I think that's really the main thing that travel did for me. But I think it applies to any situation, whether it's a family life or a career or whatever. It's just hard to see it for what it is from inside. Um,
Yeah.
and there's another guy I talked to quite a lot about this, and he raised an interesting point in that how do you know the culture that you're born and raised in is the one that's for you? Because he's gone elsewhere and he's found that he's treated much better by the people in the new places he's gone to, and he resonates much more with the way that they think. So, yeah, for me, I just felt like I've taken bits and pieces from all these different places, and I'm kind of homeless in a way, I suppose. Home at home everywhere and nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the old joke where there's these two young fish and they're swimming in the water and they're just going through their day. And then this older fish swims by them and he's like, "Hey, boys, how's the water?" The older fish, are like, or the younger fish, are like, "What's water?" Like, you don't know you're in it until you were exposed to it. Like, you don't know your own host culture is a certain way until you, like you said, you leave it. And all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that's different. It's different over there."
Yeah.
Do you
How
think
about
that,
your?
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry. You first.
Um, do you think that maybe just traveling and seeing the world from a different point of view, from having relationships from different perspectives, was part of what inspired you to write the book?
Um, I don't know. I mean, it's part of my story. I
Hmm.
never really set out to write a travel book though. So I mean, I do talk about some of my travel stuff in the book as to use an example of something else. But yeah, I'd say that it definitely contributed to a lot of the ideas that I've accumulated over the years. And The one thing I will say about it though is, I don't know, you can become lost. Some people really need that sense of identity to wherever they're living in their home culture. And that's so sometimes people like to glorify the whole travel thing, and I love it, but I just want to give anybody listening, a little grain of salt with it. Like you can, if you're too, I'm pretty open, and so sometimes I might be too open to new ways of thinking and culture, and then you sort of like lose to some extent what your core is. And I'm okay with that, but I think it can be disorienting for many people. Um, yeah, so that sort of leads into the whole identity topic, which is something I like to write about and think about a lot. So the travel in that sense has impacted my ideas regarding that.
Yeah, and just for everybody listening, the book is called Young, Successful, and Miserable, and it's by Kevin Holt here. It's a fantastic read. I've read I've read through it from front to back, but I've gone back and looked at certain sections that I felt kind of called to me and even spoke to other people about it. And again, for those listening and watching, the book is, in my opinion, it's really well done, Kevin. I'm thankful that you wrote it, and I'm thankful that I'm talking to you. It's not only a book that you can read from front to back, but it's one of the books where you can just kind of find a chapter that, like, oh, look at this, and you can dig right into it. And not only can you read it, but you can interact with it in that there's sections for you to almost do like a workout in, if that kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
Is that when you decided to write the book, did you know that you wanted the book to be interactive like that, or is that something maybe you do with your journaling, or is that just some way you look at life, or how did that come about?
That's a great question, and thank you for your comments about the book as well. I'm glad you enjoy it. I want to
I
get
did.
back after this question. I want to
Okay.
ask you what
Okay.
resonated with you and like what some of your takeaways were. But you know how when people say that sort of the muse takes over,
I do.
and I don't want to put myself in a category of some like brilliant writer because I'm not, right? I've written one book that turned out pretty okay, and I like it, but I don't think I actually set out to do anything with it, and it just sort of was almost like I vomited something up in a very short period of time. That was just it was just an accumulation of honestly a lot of anger at some
Mm,
of the structures I found myself in, the
yeah.
extent to which I accepted it when I shouldn't have, and also just a lot of things that I've learned from myself and things I've learned from others. Like I had a lot of teachers,
Yep.
and it just sort of came out all like that. And I had done courses like that where you do some self work. And I think just in the writing of it, I thought, oh, it'd be cool if actually I put something here where people could maybe write it out and go deeper into it. Because that's, I mean, in my opinion, the best way to do deep dives is just to write it out by hand. And a lot of self-help books that I've read in the past, they don't necessarily provide that to you. That just you're just listening to the author's words, and that's great. But if you actually have the time to stop and write something out for yourself, it can be more impactful. So I want to ask what you like, what resonated with you when reading it.
Well, the part that really I was reading the first couple chapters, and then the part that really made me stop and put the book down for a minute and go, man, I'm just like this guy, or I've been through this, was the part that you began talking about how you had been at a company for a while and you realized the company architecture. And I'm not talking about the building, I'm talking about the framework for leadership inside the building. You talked
Mhm.
about how it kind of seems maybe the opposite of how it should be. And then you did a little deeper dive on digitization and how digitization has gone and stripped service. It's stripped the idea of making something great for the illusion of something better. And that kind of hit home with me. And I was like, you know what? There's all these people living this illusion. And the way I did it, I looked at my work where I work at, and I work at a multinational corporation. And over the last, say, 15 to 20 years, I've noticed that the level of leadership has gone from people thoroughly understanding the job and wanting to provide a great service and a great product to someone who's willing to maybe undercut the foundation to give the illusion of productivity. And
Mhm.
I mean, I could kind of hear the anger in your voice a little bit. Like, you're like, this is not how it's supposed to be. There's all these people that are, working 12 hours, but they're not really working. And they get mad at me because I can come in and do it in 5.
Yeah.
And so that to me was the first part of the book that really resonated with me. There's more, I have more as well, but can you talk a little bit about what it was that maybe inspired you to write that, or lack of inspiration that inspired you to write that?
I suppose there's a few things. One was just the feeling of lack of agency in a lot of my career decisions.
Mm,
And that would depend on whoever's your manager at the end of the day. Like sometimes I think at that when I wrote that book, I had just quit a job where I had a very bad manager who didn't know anything about delegating and how to have
mm,
people give people autonomy over their work. So I was from a situation of not having as much autonomy as I wanted. And also, you mentioned the illusions, and I'm very much, I believe in merit, like doing
yeah.
a good job, showing up and being honest. And it just seemed like too many of the incentive structures were based on
Mm,
pretending.
yeah.
Like you said, the illusion of we're doing something great or we're making progress, right?
Yep.
But actually, you're just going in the same circle
Yep.
slightly differently every
Yep.
year and telling yourself that it's something new. And
It's so true.
and I think I wrote in the book even I was trying to be a good guy at one point
Yeah.
where I was gonna leave and I gave them like way more notice than they needed. I think in Switzerland it was 1 month notice at the time at that job, and I gave them like 6 months notice because I already knew early on this is not for me. I'm leaving, but they penalized me for that. They're like, oh well, you gave your notice before the bonus gets paid out, so you're not getting a bonus.
Mm,
So I'm like, all right, well, it would have been smarter for me if I just kept my mouth shut,
right.
screwed you guys over, took my payout and left you holding the bag with no time to replace me. So that's just one example where I feel like the incentives are perverse in a lot of those situations. I've had some really good situations. I don't want it to come
Sure.
off like I had this horrible work experience. I've had some great ones, and the last time I left was the hardest because I had the best experience, and the team was amazing, and I loved everybody there, and we were friends. But I couldn't solve the whole hamster wheel thing of illusion of progress when none was really being happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It seems to me, and it kind of saddens me when you're with a company, when you're with a structure, and you have adopted the people there as colleagues, if not friends and family that you really care about because you see them every day and you want them to be successful and you want them to be well. But
Yeah.
then you see these rules coming in that are like, hey, I've had a. Can I share a quick story with you? Would that be
Yeah.
okay?
Of course.
So I remember being at being at work, and there was these problems with production, and so I took my idea to the center manager at the time, and I was like, I see what we're trying to do here, but it seems to me we'd be much better off if maybe we streamlined and we re-looped all these different routes. I work for a trucking company, and they
Yeah.
wanted the actual driver to come in and go, okay, well, we just want more production, so we want each driver to do, roughly about an extra hour every day. And so my idea was like, okay, I get it. Like, I have stock in the company. Let's all be more productive. But wouldn't it be more productive if we re-looped the routes and we changed all the routes because they haven't been looped in like 20 years? We could
Hmm.
shave off time. It'd be more productive for everybody. And you could get a streamlined product, better service, and everything. And the guy just looked at me and he's like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I know how. I can help you. And he's like, no, that would take too much time. I was like, okay, wait a minute, so you just want these guys to do it, but you as the leader, you don't want to do it? Like, you don't want to hold yourself to the very same standard that you're trying to get other people to hold to? And he's like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. But that's just one example that upsets me because I care about the place I work. I care about the leaders and the employees. And I think that if everybody is willing to hold themselves to a higher standard, then everybody is going to be better off because of it. So
Hmm.
that was my story about that. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, it's another example of this thing of like you said, illusion. It's almost like honesty is penalized a lot of the
Yes.
time. And I remember there were very many situations where I'm speaking out. The most recent one, I was like almost yelling at people. I was like, guys, what we've invested a ton of money in this technology. I get it. And you've sold the world like it's the best thing ever. I get it. But it's not going to work. And I was the one that was closest
Mm.
to it. I was like trying to integrate these two tools for like 2 years. And I'm like, this is never going to work. There's fundamental flaws in the software. You can't get it done. But no one wanted to hear it. So I would tell my boss, and then there's still this hierarchy, right? I mean, there's a
Right.
kind of open culture there, but there's still important messages often get filtered through a channel from down to up.
Yeah.
And whatever the guy in the bottom says isn't necessarily what the person at the top hears,
Right.
because everyone in the middle is playing this sort of yes man game, unless you have really good leaders, which are rare.
Right.
So then I was saying this stuff for years, and then when I resigned to the big boss, who was my old boss, he acts like he's hearing it from the first time. And I'm like, I've been telling everyone around me, like, I've been shaking people, like, we got to do something. This is not going to work. And then, so lack of communication is another thing.
Yeah.
And when you see good leadership, it's really nice, because there's so much bad leadership. And, I have had some fortune to have really good leaders. And so I do appreciate when I see it, but it's pretty rare, actually, the really open, honest communicators out there.
Yeah. You know what? I had this idea. Let me know what you think about this. When you said that you guys were creating this technology and it came to your understanding that it didn't work, I kind of think that is exactly what's been happening in our world for the last 20 years. It seems to me that, boards of directors, CEOs, people at the top have been sold this bill of good of technology. Like, okay, this is going to make everything more productive. We're going to have these self-driving trucks. We're going to have this new technology that's way better, and it's going to alleviate, workforce. It's going to create tenfold production. But it seems to me that a lot of the technology that's been sold as a method of solving problems hasn't come to fruition. And now we're seeing these problems play out because people try to implement it and it doesn't work, but they've already bought it. They're already committed to it. And so they're rolling it out anyway. And it seems to me that in doing so, we've lost the very knowledge that had got us to where we are. We've lost the people in leadership that started at the bottom and worked their way up. And I'm just curious if you see that as maybe an isolated couple incidents, or do you think that could be the thin red thread that's woven its way through the world in which we live today?
Yeah, that's a really great observation, and I think that's I can't speak for everyone else that had, is working in jobs like this, because I've only been in one particular industry, but I've seen that exact dynamic play out across the industry, which is why I kind of left the industry, because I'm like, well, this is happening at my job. I know what's happening at these other companies. So where am I going to go? Because it's all the same. And I'll take it even a step further. I think that problem you mentioned is probably a huge reason for why people are resigning in droves, or they're miserable at work now more than ever, because what was sold as something that's supposed to enhance productivity and create growth, actually, for most of the people I was like middle management and below, but like at those level of jobs, it makes it into more drudgery, because it takes away your creativity. So, I mean, to use an example from my work, I used to do a lot in Excel, and I quite like Excel because I'm a logically oriented person and I can think of little formulas to optimize my work and view data the way I want. And then there are problems with that, though, of course, with doing everything in Excel. So then they bring in software as a solution. Problem is, now you got to do it that way. You can only do it the way the software allows you to do it. So you have way less autonomy over how you control your work. And then what kept happening to me is it took me twice as long to get the job done, because something I could just do in Excel, I had to do this roundabout way in the software. And it just ended up being more boring and took longer. And then, of course, you're evaluated on, your productivity, and what they gave me made my productivity go down. So I don't know. For me, it was okay, but a lot of people struggled. They worked longer and they were just more miserable. And so, it just hasn't really, what they've sold it as hasn't really come to fruition, as you said. So I think that's, I do think I mentioned, I forget the exact quote I use in the book, but I think it's pretty funny, like some drudgery, soul-eating drudgery or something with each wave of digitization.
Yeah, that's the part that that was the first part that reached through the pages. Like, listen to this. I was like, oh, I love this guy, man. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And of course, like you said, they've already invested millions, right? And then no one's going to listen to me because it's a message they don't want to hear. So as long as there's someone higher than me that's saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, we're doing great, boss," they're like, "Okay, we can forget
Yep.
about that and continue."
Yeah.
And they know people are going to come and go anyway, so they kind of don't care to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems to me that that's when you begin to see a lot of creative accounting happening. Oh yeah, this is totally productive. Hang on, I'm going to
Oh,
switch this eight
absolutely.
to a zero, and then everybody loses.
Or they
So
defer the cost to another quarter, or I don't know. I
yep,
don't know what they're doing with
yep,
it.
yeah. It's
And then
it's
of course
interesting.
the willingness to like actually go, oh crap, like it's not going to work. Let's scrap this investment and start over and invest another few million. It's not popular in leadership to report losses or lack of profit, you know.
Yeah. No one ever wants to admit they're wrong, but the truth is if you don't admit something's wrong, it never gets better. Right? Like
Right.
you have to be willing to be like, okay, I made a mistake. But if you do that, you're probably gonna get fired. So what are you gonna do? You're just gonna extend and pretend until you know make
Yeah.
pretend it works, I guess.
And me, they kept promoting me, so I'm like, what? I mean, I'm talking shit all the time,
Yeah.
and you're still letting me get away with it. Like, so you're not listening to me, but you're not getting rid of me. Like, what is the situation? And then
Yeah.
they kept trying to put me on stuff that's like, oh yeah, we can put Kevin on it, he'll fix it. And then after a
Right.
while, I realized it's not fixable. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
so,
when you seem to me like a person who genuinely cares and wants to help people. And I'm stoked that there's people like you there's probably people, hopefully there's more people like you in buildings and in companies and in boardrooms around the world because we definitely need it. I wanted to ask you, do you have some interesting stories, almost the trifecta of death that came your way? Like you've had these crazy experiences, near death experiences that I thought were, you know, hopefully everybody has at least one in their life where they come to this road to Damascus moment. And it seems like you've had three of them. Can you share maybe one or two or three of them about what happened and how do you think it changed you?
well, yeah, I think the second one is is good to share because there's sort
Okay.
of a background to it.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I've had three, as you mentioned. I had a near
Right.
drowning thing, and then the one I want to talk about is the heart attack the year after.
Mm,
So yeah, that happened when I was 19. And what was interesting about that, there's a backstory, which I don't think I wrote about, but I was at a crossroads and basically one route was traveling and one route was going to this business school where I was. And I don't want to get into more details, but basically they were incompatible. So I was doing summer session because I was taking summer courses, and it was like a week before the last exam I had to take. And if I aced that exam, it would have got me into the business school, at which point I would be confronted with that choice. Okay, do I do that or do I do this? A couple days before, out of nowhere, I have a heart attack. It's like 10 in the morning. I'm eating cereal and like I'm by myself in the apartment that I was sharing. And I have all the telltale things. I had the numbness in the arms, it
right.
was in both arms. And I was like, man, this is weird, but it can't be a heart attack. Like that's insane.
Mhm.
Because I was in awesome shape. I was playing competitive racquetball for the school. I was in the gym every day. I was playing 2 or 3 hours a day. I was swimming. I was lifting weights. I was doing all kinds of stuff. I was like, no, that can't be. So I laid down for a while, and then I started getting this arrhythmia, and I could like palpably hear
Ooh.
it. And then I was like, well, I feel like an idiot, but I'm gonna have to go to the hospital. So I drove myself to the nearby university hospital, which is about 10 minutes away. By the way, terrible idea. Anybody listening, don't do it. I was too embarrassed to call 911. That's a stupid reason to drive yourself to a hospital while you're having a heart attack because you can lose consciousness and die. All right.
Right.
Luckily, I did not. So I got to the parking lot, checked myself in, and I went to the lady there and I said, hey, I think I'm having a heart attack. And then she said, well, are you doing exams right now? And I said, well, yeah, I actually have an exam in a couple of days. She's like, oh, okay. Well, go talk to the charge nurse then, and she'll check you in. So then I go talk to the nurse. And then, of course, if you've ever been to a hospital in the US or any kind of clinic, they check you in, they ask you to rate your pain on this infamous scale of 1 to 10 or whatever it is. So I don't know if I deluded myself in hearing this or misheard or whatever, But she said, please rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no pain, 10 being the worst pain you can imagine. So I don't know if she exactly said the worst pain you ever felt or the worst pain you can imagine, but I heard worst pain you can imagine. And I've got a very vivid imagination. So I'm like, okay, what the 10 is like being burned alive, or there's medieval torture, flaying the skin off me or whatever. So if that's a 10, this is like a 5, right? I
Right.
mean, it hurts, but it's not anything compared to that. So I mark 5. And they're like, okay, go in the waiting room. So I go in the waiting room and like 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes, 25, 30, no one's coming to get me. And I'm like pale, I'm shaking, and I'm like almost losing consciousness. I can barely keep my eyes open. So then I managed to drag myself back over to the desk again. I was like, I know you this so it's been like an hour and a half now since I've had
Wow.
these heart attack symptoms, or close to that. And then I finally get myself, I'm like, look, I know you think I'm stupid, but I really think I'm gonna have a heart attack. And they're like, oh yeah, they were just looking for you and whatever. So they bring me into this hallway, so a makeshift bed, and they once again give me anti-anxiety medicine because they're still operating under the assumption that I'm worried about my exams.
Right.
So that does nothing, right? So there's another 20, 30 minutes where like I'm just sitting there like, oh, like just like being constricted, like just there's a vice around my chest, can't breathe
Yeah.
very well, and all this pain and stuff. And they finally do the scan, and I come back from the scan. They're like, "Hey, we think you had a heart attack." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I've been telling you that for almost an hour and a half in the hospital."
Right.
And then they gave me the thing that it's like nitroglycerin
Mm.
that you put under the tongue, and that just opens your arteries. And then it kind of went away, like the pain went away in literally 5 or 10 minutes. And then I was just like walking around as if nothing happened.
Mm.
So, oh yeah, they thought I smoked crack. That was they're like, did you smoke crack recently? It's like, no crystal meth, anything like that. It's like, no. So it's just, I don't know. It's just this fluke thing that I suppose anyone can have. I mean, it's very low probability, but basically an artery just randomly spasmed closed
Mm.
and cut off the blood flow to my heart. And I'm telling the story because it's entertaining, but the backstop of the story is that once I got out, once I got recovered, this decision tree was like crystal clear.
Mm.
There was no doubt that, it's a travel thing. I'm going traveling. Like I'd had no more interest in the business school thing. I ended up taking the test, getting in anyway, but I was like, I don't care. I've already decided. So it's an extreme example of, I think we have this a lot. Like a lot of people have this, if you're aware to it, where if you have this sort of fork in the road of life, if you put the question out there, sometimes you get answers in ways you're not expecting. And I think that was kind of what this was. It was like the travel is the heart path, and then the work is like the logical mind path. And it's like heart attack. Hey, pay attention to your heart. What do you really want to do? And then I looked at it and I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, that's pretty clear what I want to do. So then
Yeah.
then I'm going to Spain. Stayed there. I was supposed to go for a semester, ended up staying like over a year. I got a job there, like bartending, just like had the best time, and had no desire before that to really go traveling. But this experience gave me that travel bug. And then after I was like another 6 months, I had to go back to graduate, and then I just left. I took off. I went to Japan after that. Um, Stayed in Japan 2 years, Taiwan 5 years. Yeah, so that really opened up a whole chapter of life. I don't know if it's hard to say because it's most impactful when these things happen to you, but even then they don't last very long.
Mm.
It's really only, for a few years you have this incredible gratitude for life and that you survived and that you can still breathe and stuff. But I think after a few weeks you're kind of back to normal. So it really requires reinforcement, just maybe every day do a little bit of that kind of death awareness that you could die anytime, and just try to get at what you really want to do. So that's my takeaway. The other takeaways I've had from these experiences is just how like anything can change, like literally at any time. And what you think is you're so comfortable with and secure and that's yours and that you can hold on to, it could be gone anytime. And I've had a lot of different episodes, not only these stories, but a couple other things that have happened where literally, boom, everything just sort of changes in a very short time. And I think what it has done for me is allow me to sort of surf in the wave of uncertainty
Hmm.
more than I otherwise might have been able to. I think that's my main takeaway from all that.
Yeah, that's an incredible lesson because the truth is, the only certainty we have is this false sense of security that we build around us. Like it, things can happen, and they do happen a lot. And in some ways, as horrible as tragedy can be, it seems to me it can be looked at as a gift once you've gotten through the pain or you've gotten through the grieving process, because it clears away all the detritus and it clears away the the bullshit. Like you said, it was like,
Hmm.
here you are struggling and like, oh, I'm gonna focus on getting in this school because it would mean all these other things, and your heart's like, nah, man.
Yeah,
Like
nah,
your heart was literally not in it. You know what I mean? Your heart
exactly.
wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And so I'm thank you. First off, thanks for sharing that story, and thank you for putting it in the book, because that's what I got out of it was, yes, these things that we feel are tragic are usually events in our life where we're at a crossroad, where we've been thinking about something and our body's not in tune with our language, or our brain and our body, the mind body connection is severed. And the world will grab you by the hand and pull you a certain way, when hopefully when you're making bad decisions, hopefully you listen to it. Like, you could have chose not to listen to that, but like, I'm going to this business school anyway. And
Hmm.
you it might have been two more heart attacks before you decided that maybe you were going down the wrong road there.
I did end up circling back to the business world, so I was like, oh, maybe I can do it
Yeah,
later, and then I
and
went
you
to business
can.
school much later and then got
Right.
into that world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But it's
interesting
funny though,
too.
is I wrote about the migraines. I started having those around the business school the second time. I'm like, now I'm just now for the first time thinking about that. I was like, wow, okay. Maybe they're like, nope, this still isn't right. I don't know.
It's like, how do we get through to you?
Yeah. You're not listening. Stubborn life child.
Yeah.
This is the
Yep.
universe trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tap on his head a little bit. Hit him in the heart, get him in the head. Let's see what we
Yeah.
can do here.
What can we take from this guy? When is he going to finally get it?
He's a tough one.
Yeah. He's a stubborn one.
But on the flip side of that too, you learn that you can push through your comfort zone and get things done. And on some level, when you tell me that story, how you doubled back, it makes me think that the deal you struck with yourself, okay, I'll travel now, but then I'll come back. A lot of people would never follow through with that. So,
Mm.
depending on how you want to look at it, I think you can look at it in a positive way. Like, yeah, I went and I traveled, I learned, and then I doubled back and was true to myself because I made a deal with myself to go back to it.
And I kind of I found a way to double back without sacrificing the travel, which I think is difficult to
Yes.
do, but I got lucky because I did have gone to business school like at the master's level, but I did it in Taiwan. So I was still like in
Oh,
Taiwan living there and I'm like, oh, I can get this education at the same time. And then I moved to Switzerland where I'd never like lived in as an adult before and started my career there. So it was still like a new environment. So yeah, I was sort of managed to do it like that. So I was very lucky, I think.
yeah.
Just
How did
responding
you?
to the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you found being educated in one country and then applying for a job in another country? Do you find that the country that you're applying for the job in tends to look at your credentials from another country on a positive note, or do they look at it through maybe a little bit of a lowered brow?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think Switzerland is a Europe versus US is a bit tricky because
Hmm.
I find that in the US people are much more open. They're much more open to you bringing an experience to a potential job that isn't necessarily what you studied for the last 10 years, right? So they,
Right.
they might give you a start in like sales if you've never done sales before. But in Europe, specifically in Switzerland, everybody's hyper specialized.
Hmm.
And it's another interesting like road we can go down about generalization versus specialization.
Hmm.
But there, it was probably not an advantage because they had so many people where they had been doing that exact thing for so long, like in every industry. So it's kind of hard to break into, quite honestly. Um, and it was also the trap of being overqualified for stuff or under experienced but overqualified. which is silly. Like there's a lot of job ads out there that for entry level work they want you to have 5 years experience. So it's like, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I ran into that quite a bit. And I'm somebody who was like, I don't need to start here. I mean, I'm new to this place. I just give me any job. I'll work a temp job.
Yeah.
But even temp agencies were like, hey, you got a master's degree. There's nothing here for you. But I'm like, I don't care. Like, I need to eat, right? I need an
Right.
income. So it's a little bit different mentality there.
Yeah, I've noticed if we backtrack just a little bit, I've noticed that a lot of the new books coming out, well, a lot of the new books that I've been reading, even like I think your book is this way, and I think a lot of the new exciting fields are interdisciplinary. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to the last few years, it was this incredible hyper specialization where people that are on the extremes, they're almost not even talking the same language.
Yep.
It's so in depth, and so I know the left pinky fingernail, but it's way different than the pointer fingernail. And so it's easy to see how we've gotten so separated from each other when in the same field there is, you know what, it reminds me of this. It reminds me of the idea that there's more numbers between 0 and 1 than there are between 1 and infinity. If you think about that for a minute, yeah, because there's 0.01, 0.001, 0.0001,
right,
and there's
right.
smaller numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that seems to me to be like specialization. Like we can break it down so fine that you need a super special microscope. But at some point in time, you got to pan back and look at the big picture and be like, okay, we've lost it here. Let's get back to whole numbers here and figure this thing out. But what is your take on the special hyper specialization versus the big picture?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was just thinking about this before we started talking today, actually. There's a great word in German called
nice.
called Fachidiot. The word Fach means specialization, and idiot means idiot. So we have so many people who hyper specialize, but as you said, they only see this little, fingernail, and they lose a whole big picture. And you see that in, I mean, you just look at the COVID and vaccine debates.
Yeah.
You can't, unless you have a PhD in this like one little tranche of medicine, it's almost like your opinion isn't valid. Like you're unable to draw inferences from other sources and tie it to what you've already known. And it's an interesting way of stifling debate on the one hand. On the other hand, we're not getting anywhere because we just have these people talking in their echo chambers and no one else is allowed to participate. And that ties into kind of what we were talking about before with the work culture. I think work was a lot more interesting when we were generalists because you weren't necessarily just doing bookkeeping all day long every day. You might have been doing a little bit of that, a little bit of customer support, a little bit of, a lot more variety in your work. And I love those. Sorry, there's a plane flying overhead. But I like the stories from, if you read these books like Not Think and Grow Rich, but of that era, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and you have this sense of anything was possible, and people would just walk up to Thomas Edison's company and say, "Hey, I'm Mr. Nobody. I want to work for your company, Mr. Edison." And he's like, "Okay, here you go, sir. I gave you a chance." And it doesn't happen like that anymore so much. And there's so many barriers, artificial or otherwise, in the way of that. And I think it made white collar work much more boring, much more like an assembly line. If you think about, you're so specialized, you're just doing this one tiny piece of the process. And I've always been the opposite way, and I always felt my whole life like society was telling me I was doing something wrong, because I've always been super general and I have all these different interests from different areas, but they didn't translate so well into the career world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
So I don't really know the solution, but I think being more general is good. But then there's the argument of, well, the more we specialize, the more wealthy we become, right? Because all the Western economies are around really specialized labor. So I don't know if there's a way to do that. Maybe we do need to lose some, wealth or whatever to figure it out. But I don't really know how we navigate that. I hope we can figure it out.
I think it's going to happen. Like I think it's happening now, because when you're so specialized, You no longer have a difference of opinion. You only have the opinion that was taught to you by the guy who knew the person who was the perfect specialist. So everyone has the same blinders on. And that's why we can't solve problems. It's like, we're going to go to these professionals that all think exactly the same. Okay, well, you're going to get the exact same solution. And
Hmm.
when you said that, when you gave your example about Edison, or even your life that you lived as a generalist, that allows you to see the problem from a fresh set of eyes. Like it's like, if you ever have a problem and then you're like, I can't figure this out, but you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning, you can figure it out because you got this fresh idea on it. You can see it differently. We need
Yeah.
that same sort of problem solving method from different angles of life. And that should be what diversity is. Diversity should be a difference of opinion. It shouldn't be, okay, we need this person, we need this type of person, that type of person, but I want them to all think the same. It's back to the illusion of diversity. Just because people look different and have
Right.
different genders doesn't mean they think different. And in fact, if we take all these different colored people and put them in the same institution, okay, now you have a bunch of different looking people that all think the same. Nothing's happening like that. You have to get
Yeah.
people from different walks of life. And it just seems to be a natural filter process to filter that out. And I think it gets back to that people don't want to be wrong. So let's hire people that will do what we tell them and think the same. But we're running from the very thing that would free us, I think.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the corporate world too,
Yeah.
because to get a corporate job, usually you have to go to a four-year university.
Yep.
Four-year universities tend to be somewhat conformist in how they want you to think about things.
Yeah.
So then you get into a group of, peers already at that level, and then they all go to the same companies. And yeah, they could be from whatever background, any kind of
Yep.
ethnicity or race, but they've learned to think and look at the world through the similar lenses, so you don't really have that much diversity anymore. And it's also when we were talking about generalists, who are the people that used to be idolized? You think about Da Vinci, the Renaissance people. Da Vinci, look at
Yeah.
all the things Da Vinci was good at.
Yep.
He had like 15 different amazing abilities because he was so all over the place.
Yeah.
And the founding fathers of the U.S., they were all like really diversely educated people.
Yep.
And it's like that exposure to different ideas that ends up being just the driver of a lot of like the best inventions and innovations, I think, rather than somebody who's just doing one thing and not looking at anything else. So we lost creativity, I think, overall by going down this route.
There's a parallel I see between what we're talking about and like your book. And that is, let me try to set it up the way where, if you think about like an engine, like there's a bust and a boom, like a piston goes up and it goes down and it explodes and then it comes back, explodes and it comes back. The same way the tide of the ocean goes out and then it comes in. It goes out and then it comes in. And the same way our economy has a boom bust cycle. We expand out and then it collapses and it expands back out and it collapses. I think specialization is a form of expansion because it's like it goes way out. The same way you would take an ink bottle and smash it against the wall, and then
Hmm.
all the ink would fall out and there'd be these little spirals and stuff, but it's still
Yeah.
the same ink. The way I see your book written is like there's this premise, and then you go and you've traveled to Spain, you've expanded to Switzerland, you've expanded through different relationships, you've expanded through these near-death experiences, and then you bring it back. And so I'm often lately I've been seeing this pattern in good books like yours and in life and in the world in which we live. I'm wondering, do you see patterns like that, not only in your life and in your writing, but throughout the world you live?
I do, but I want to ask you a question
Okay,
about
please.
what you just said when you're talking about the patterns of expanding and bringing it back. What do you think of the idea that our artificial delaying of the bringing it back over the last few decades due to Fed monetary policy, people pumping more stuff into the system, delaying exactly what you're talking about?
Oh, it's futile. Like there's no way. Like you can't. It's like the tide goes out, and then I draw a line in the sand to try to catch the water. It's like, dude, it's not gonna work. It's like a
Yeah,
sandcastle, and you can pretend, and you could pretend the emperor's wearing clothes, but there's nothing those people can do. Like there's gonna be a
other than delay it.
radical.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the more you delay, the truth is, I don't know. I don't think it'll work, but maybe if you dug a deep enough hole, it would catch the water as it came back. But I don't think you can stop the cycles. You may be able to delay them, but are you really delaying it, or are you just causing pain in different areas?
Right, that's what I'm suggesting, right? Because it's been delayed for so long, and then it's given rise to all these ills that we're talking about, right?
Right.
The over specialization, because we're not bringing it back.
Yeah.
They keep putting it off. I mean,
Yeah.
eventually it will. I mean, probably in our lifetimes, maybe very soon. Who knows?
Why do you think they're doing that?
It's the same thing, like in the companies. It's politically driven. Who wants to be responsible for the great pullback, right? Nobody.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to be
nobody
like, oh, that
does.
happened on my watch. No way. I'm gonna kick the can. Man, that guy's gonna. It's like hot potato.
Yep.
And I just feel like they keep playing hot potato so that they can extract where they need to in fast enough time. Then you hope the other person that comes in and does it, but they're playing the same game, right? So it just
Right.
keeps going and going until it hits that critical mass where you can't do it anymore, which I don't think is that far off, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you think that we're as do you think we're as guilty as the people in positions of authority? Like, and by we, I mean guys like me and you doing a podcast right now that get up and do their thing. Are we just as guilty as the people in positions of authority?
Probably. I mean, most people don't really want to do anything about it because it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like my comfortable life and all the stuff at my fingertips and food delivered to my door or whatever. I don't want to go through periods of famine and unpleasantness, but it's going to require something like that. So yeah, we all put it off either physically or psychologically, I think, and we
Yeah.
just in our minds we just feel like I mean, how old are you, may I ask?
Yeah. 47.
Well, so maybe not the extent that I have, but I've pretty much only lived during good times, right? If you think about, okay, there've been a couple of recessions, the dot-com burst and maybe the one 2008, but we haven't had any real pain, and we've just had the good life, at least in the West, and we just have this expectation that's just going to keep going, and that we're never going to have to pay that reckoning. So kick the can in the next generation. That's what people are kind of doing.
Yeah. The silver lining that I try to pull up over myself is that in times of radical change, there's radical opportunity. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll become a multi-millionaire or a Robin Baron or one of these Carnegie individuals, but it does mean that you have an opportunity to ride that wave back in, and you can change who you are with greater intensity and flow if you go with it. And for me, like I've been a UPS driver for 25 years, and I've been lucky to travel around the world. And I love reading, and I've found myself over the last ever since COVID hit, like it's fundamentally changed me who I am. Like I've been able to I always like helping people, and I try to volunteer when I can and help people. But when COVID hit, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna start a channel. I'm gonna do some podcasting, and today I'm talking to you. And dude, you're an awesome person, and my book is awesome. And I've spoken to other people who are really cool, and I've gotten to learn so much more. And I've created all these new relationships because of the great pullback, because of the recession, because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I's relationship has become better, and she's gotten to work from home a little bit, and it's fundamentally changed the way we spend money because we don't have a whole lot of money anymore. And so I think that to see the change and try to build a dam and not change is futile. But if you can kind of understand a little bit, or at least see the direction things are moving, then you yourself can move with it, and you can change and use it as a catalyst for that change. So I think that there are some silver linings if you're willing to accept a little bit of pain and just know that pain is change and that we're always changing. So you should embrace this pain and embrace this change.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about developing resilience and just kind
Yeah.
of, at least mentally, perhaps financially with ties or whatever, and just to be able to respond to what comes.
What's the alternative, right?
Yeah. Holding on, going down with the ship.
Sliding
Not that I
down the
subscribe
wall.
to that, but I'm sure many people do.
Well, I think we've probably both done it before, and we know it doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
when I was, oh man, in 2010, my son died, and for me, that was like, it took so long. I held on to that ship for as long as I can because it meant death, and I didn't want to hold on, and I couldn't let go. I'll die if I let go. My family will die if I let go. I can't
Hmm.
let go. I'm the dad. I'm the husband. I can't not let go of this. And everything died. Relationships died. Part of me died. My relationship with my wife almost died.
Mm.
I lost my kid, like lost everything, man.
Yeah.
And as as you finally let go, you begin to understand, you know, maybe there's a gift here. And that sounds so fucking crazy, but
No, it doesn't sound crazy at all. I fully agree with you.
like I learned, like that is when I learned the purpose of tragedy. The purpose of
Mm.
tragedy is because there's something bigger than we can understand. There's something bigger than we can comprehend. And the purpose of tragedy is that this bigger force believes you. It chose you. Hey, this is gonna hurt really effing bad, but I'm gonna take you through it. And when you come through the other side, I think you're strong enough to come out that other side and help people that it's going to happen to. So I'm gonna give you the sight to see it happening. I'm gonna give you the sight to see the abuse before it happens. And then I'm also gonna give you and entrust you with the privilege of helping those people get through that event because you can do it because I chose you to do this. And I start thinking like, God damn, like somebody loved me and believed in me enough. Call it God or Gaia or Buddha or Mohammed, call it whatever you want. But there's this force that loved you so much, it caused you the worst pain possible because it knew that would change you, because it knew that you can go help other people. And that's when I learned, okay, let go. I know you can't let go. And so now when I see other people that are white knuckling it, dude, I'm coming over to you. I see you. Hey, what's going on? What's up with these white knuckles, man? What are you doing? Just let go.
Mm.
No, I can't let go, George. Like, yes, you can. Like, I think that is what allows you to change. Like, part of you has to die so something can grow back. Part of you must die so that you can move forward. And it's very painful, but it's necessary.
Yeah, totally. There's something in. I mean, I've never lost a child. I imagine that's pretty much the worst experience possible. But I've gone through other things where I think it just teaches you that you just have to surrender. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes you just feel
beautiful.
like completely helpless
Yeah,
in the face of the whatever this mystery is. Like it can give, it can take away, whatever.
yeah,
You can lose everything at any time. And I have like been to that point too, where I'm just like, fuck, like not I give up. That's a little different,
right,
right?
right,
But like
right.
kind of, kind of like,
Yeah,
all right,
surrender is such a
just
great word.
surrender to it, and whatever happens, happens. And you do learn to be thankful for it
Yeah,
because you do go through that death and rebirth. And on the other side of it, I'm sure you experience as well, but when I went through like a depression maybe
yeah,
about two or
yep.
3 years ago, like
Hmm.
after my wife left me and then some other stuff happened. And I'd never even come close to feeling depressed before. And this thing just like caught me and I got wrapped
Yeah,
up in it. But when I came out at the other side of it, I felt like a whole new person. I just felt like this sort of indestructibility inside, having gone through it. And okay, that didn't kill me. Like I survived this.
yeah,
I'm good. And then you sort of, for me, it was a natural kind of let go even more after that because it sort of taught me, well, maybe I maybe I don't have anything, but as long as I've got what's in here, as long as I got my health, then it can't take anything else away. That's the way I
yeah.
felt anyway.
No, that's it's brilliant. And once something like that happens to you, you can see the lessons that are trying to be taught by antiquity. Like if you read a lot of the old scriptures, like you look at Abraham like sacrificing his son. If you look at like the Aztec culture, there's all this talk of sacrifice. And what if those are metaphors for like, you must sacrifice everything. And when you do, you can learn something new. Like for me, going through these incredibly painful loss, be it a wife, a child, a job for some people, it's this loss that allows you to identify with the lessons of the past. There's always talk about sacrifice, but you don't understand sacrifice until you've lost the thing that you thought you couldn't live without. And
Hmm.
now all of a sudden, you realize not only can I live without it, but I'm better because of it. And it's so
Hmm.
hard to come to that because it's so hard to square that is like, how can I be better that I lost this thing that I love more than anything in the world? How can I possibly be better? But that's probably a pretty good meditation for people to think about. Can you be better if you lost the thing that was most important to you? Like, a lot of good can come from thinking about that. Maybe
Yep.
maybe 4 grams of mushrooms and that thought for a while can fundamentally change the way you see the world.
Yeah, this is where, yeah, like you said, psychedelics have had traditionally, ancestrally had, a huge role in reminding people of this
Yeah.
because I don't know, maybe everyone has to go through something like this in their lives. I don't know. There might be some blessed people that never do, but I suppose you can anticipate it through some
Yeah.
psychedelic practices, and especially the one that does it for me the most is ayahuasca with the Temazcal sweat lodge.
I've never.
So well, it was like it's brutal. It can be brutal. The one I've done it with, the shaman I went with, he's like relentless with this with the sweat lodge, and he actually makes us drink it and then go in the sweat lodge and stay in there for like 3 hours.
Whoa.
And yeah, it's intense. It's intense, and you feel like you're gonna suffocate. You don't have water. There's just you're always aware of death, and
Yeah.
you're not really gonna die, but it feels so intense, and it's so hot in there. Like it's hotter than any sauna I've ever been in, and you get to a point, like I remember a few times where I just literally was on the dirt in sort of child's pose and like complete surrender. I was like, I can't even sit. Like
Yeah.
I'm that defeated. And the only way we could get through it sometimes was through singing these powerful songs. And there are times where like you're on the brink of like, well, I can't take this anymore. I'm gonna die or whatever. And then there's something in there, some little
Yeah.
power or will that's like, no, right? And then you start,
Yeah.
you start getting pumped up and you start with the
Yep.
drums and like that brings you back. And it's almost like you look at death and you're like, no. And yeah, it's really powerful.
That is awesome, man. Have you done that a couple times or?
Ayahuasca I've done probably maybe 9 or 10 times with
Wow.
not every time with the sweat lodge,
Right.
but probably like maybe four like that, 3 or 4. The first one I was like I didn't even make it. Like they went through 4 rounds and I didn't know that. And after one round was like 15, 20 minutes. And I thought it was over. Like I was literally, I can't do it. And they're like, nope, there's 3 more. I was like, oh, I'm out of here. I had to leave. Like I had to leave. I couldn't do it. But yeah, it's really intense, but worth it. And it does feel like a rebirth. Because you go in naked, first of all. So you go in there and then you go through this kind of death episode, and then you're literally crawling because you got no strength. You've just been dehydrated. The
Yeah.
effects are still on you. You're like crawling out of this thing that looks like the womb of the Mother Earth out to the other side,
Wow.
and then you kind of like, you're cold and naked in a ball, kind of just like you've just been born again. It's amazing.
That's as that's pretty close to I mean, that's as close as you can come to being reborn. It's just a full
Yeah.
shutdown and reboot.
Hmm.
But I think there's a lot of power in there. I think that, when you come to those crossroads, you see the world differently. I mean, and it makes sense if you start looking back at indigenous ways. Like, there is a process for becoming a man. There is a process for becoming. There's a rite of passage. If you think about that language, a rite of passage. Like when you go through the birth canal, that's a rite of passage. When you
Hmm.
climb out of the sweat lodge, that's a rite of passage. And maybe that's something that in the Western tradition, we have failed to do. Like, our rite of passage is like graduating college. Hey, congratulations, you graduated college. But
Yeah.
Was that a near death experience? Did you become a man or did you become a woman? Or, it's not the same type of rite of passage as the rites of passage that have been in folklore and in humanity since the beginning of time.
Yeah, you go and your book was called Terra Sacred, right?
Terror
Did
before
I
the
get it?
sacred.
Terror
Yeah,
Before
that's
the Sacred.
exactly what it's about.
Yeah, that's I mean you talk about that quite a bit about the absence of ritual, especially for men, I think,
Yes,
because men seem to need it more. Because women have the natural one, they get their period and
they
it's like
do.
very intense for them.
Yeah. And their relationship with their child is just, it's so much more than, at least in my opinion, like my wife's relationship with our daughter and our son is, I'm jealous of sometimes because it's so pure. And, I once heard this quote that said the difference between a man and a woman in the relationship with their child is when your child's sick and the wife can't stop thinking about it, but the husband just gets up and goes to work and does his day. Like I
Yeah.
can compartmentalize that, but my wife can't. She's like, "We need to fix this." She's got 102. I notice she's sweating a little bit. Like she knows every detail, and it makes sense. Like she carried her in her body for like 9 months. So yeah, I agree. I think that there can be more rituals for men, and there should be, and somehow that's been looked down upon for the last maybe 30 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to see it in Bali where I'm living now, where there's more and more of these men's circles. I don't know, do they
Mhm.
have those where you are in
Not
Hawaii?
I'm sure they do, but I'm not a member of any.
Yeah, me neither. I've been to one before and I see the value in it, but it seems to be more and more that there are some things like that and groups organizing. They're more just talking sessions, though. It's not the same as we're still missing that initiation right into manhood, and I haven't
Yeah.
seen too many great substitutes for that in our society, unfortunately. And I think it's leading to a lot of lost men,
Yeah.
um, especially when you hit our age. Like I'm gonna be 40 this year, where I don't know, I was thinking of this a lot lately because my father died a while ago. So he died when I was 26. And you're talking about the relationship between mother and father, and
Mhm.
for me at least, or I think maybe in general you can say this, but I think I was tied to my mom a lot more as younger, right? And
Sure.
you see people on their deathbed or dying in war, they reach out, they call for their moms, not their dads.
Yeah.
But there is a certain age where I feel like the dad plays more of a role, and I feel like we don't feel it till we get older.
Yeah.
And unless we've had that initiation or the wise elders, men in our community, we're sort of missing something. There's a void. And
Yeah.
I haven't found anything to really address that other than Freemasonry, which comes close.
Yeah.
Freemasonry comes close to that.
Yeah, you had mentioned that you had found out that your father had participated as a Mason, and
My
then
grandfather.
your grandfather, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like you find this group of men that can be mentors to you that maybe knew some, obviously, that shared a similar passion to your grandfather. I think that there's
Yeah.
something to be said about that.
Yeah, and I like if we're talking about Freemasonry, I got to put this like
Yeah,
disclaimer
please.
out there
Right.
because there's a lot of stuff I've seen about Freemasons taking over the world and they're the hidden cabinet behind the World Economic Forum and all this stuff. My official statement is I don't know. Okay, I
Right.
don't know or not if that's
Right.
true or not. It could be at the highest levels of the organization. They get together and they plot things. You can't put that past any group of people. But all I've seen from my limited, I've only been a member for a few years and not recently because of COVID. I haven't really been to meetings. But all I've seen is a group of it's like gentlemen's school. It's like guys that generally seem to be good people that are trying to be better. That's what I've gotten from it. And they use ritual to teach certain things, and there's
Right.
a camaraderie, and there's sort of that bonding thing that happens. And it's an imperfect substitute for probably what we used to go through in more primitive days. But I think it serves its purpose pretty well. I'm happy to be a member.
Yeah,
But I
I
just
think
wish there were more things like that.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it I remember as a kid watching the Flintstones, and they were all part of the Loyal Order of the Water Buffalo. And it seems like men, our grandfather's age, it was prevalent that every town had a lodge of some kind, whether it was the Moose Lodge or the Elks Lodge, or,
Yeah.
there's all these lodges for guys to get together and be like, hey, I'm having this problem in my relationship. Hey, I'm having this problem with my kid. Hey, I'm having this. And the same way that maybe a young man that was indigenous to America would go to the elders. We don't have that for young men now. Like, you might have teachers, but you don't have this area where where it's easy to go and pick a mentor. I was
Right.
lucky when I found some really great older guys in my life that I just attached myself to, and I got to learn from. And I learned a lot. Some of it was pretty painful, but there's something to be said about an older guy that can tell you, hey, you arrogant little fuck, you don't know what you're doing. Why would you say that? And like, young men need that. Like,
Hmm.
and maybe your dad can't do that for you because you don't have a good relationship. But if there's somebody you admire that you respect, and they can grab you by the collar and be like, you are such a dummy. What is wrong with you? Or it doesn't have to be negative. It could be like, hey, I noticed you're doing this. How about this over here? But I let me just take one more shot at this here. One of my mentors told me a story about a group of elephants, and he said that he had read about this two young elephants that went to the zoo, and the zoo had them for like 5 years. And these young elephants were two boys, and they were going around the whole park just crushing everything and tearing down fences and mowing down trees. And the zoo people were like, dude, what are we gonna do with these elephants, man? We have to put them down. We're gonna ship them away. And so they made all these calls, and they called this elephant park in Africa somewhere. And the guy said, no, look, they're just young. They're just young kids, man. They're young boys. You need to bring in an older elephant. That guy will show them what's up. So they brought in this older elephant, and sure enough, within a matter of like months, they started watching the older elephant that like wasn't tearing stuff down, that wasn't breaking things. And when one of the younger elephants would go and break this fence, the older elephant would walk over there and smack him. Be like, what are you doing, dummy? That's not what you're supposed to do. And so it's this idea of guidance. It's this idea of looking at someone who's been through situations. And that's the story behind mythology. That's the story behind the Homeric verses. That's the Iliad, the Odyssey, the hero's journey. It's Joseph Campbell. It's there. And it's almost like these things are smacking us in the face, like, hey, you guys forgot, man. You gotta lead. And that
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, Kevin. Like, in your book, I think that there's so much wisdom there. Like, I gave a copy of your book to my nephew because I thought there was so much wisdom in there. So thank
Oh,
you for
thank you.
that. I think, and when I see your journey, I see you traveling and making these decisions about, okay, I'm going to travel here, and then I'm going to go to business school, or here's what I've here's a guy that's running his way up through the corporate world and finds some problems there, and it goes out of his way to face the threshold guardian. Like, it's so Joseph Campbellish to me, man. Thanks for doing it.
I appreciate those words. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Yeah. We need more of those kinds of things. I don't know, like I think within every, or maybe not every man, but within a lot of men, we love our women. We love the homes we create, but
yeah,
there's something missing, and it's maybe because we're somewhat feel like we're caged wolves or something, but there's something with like we need that man, the just being around men, just being men without
yeah,
filter or without being told that we're disgusting or whatever. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so I definitely think that we can do way better there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How would that look like? I mean, would that look like, maybe it might look like joining a men's club or something like that, but
yeah.
what advice would you give to maybe your self 10 years ago or 15 years ago to kind of fill this void?
Well, yeah, I've done it with Freemasonry to a certain extent, but anybody who's listening that's thinking they need something like that, if you can't find a men's circle, just try starting one. And it can be just
Yeah.
something amongst your friends, it doesn't have to be um, any real formal thing, but you should make it somehow ritualistic or ceremonial a little bit. So a lot of the circles I've been to, they do, they do it at night. They usually put like kind of soft lighting, and they might even have, I forget what the word is for it, but you know that piece of wood smoke that they light the wood and then they kind of put it around you. You
Like
know what
an
I'm talking about?
incense or something, or like a
It's there's a word for it. It's slipping my
okay.
mind, but it's literally a specific piece of wood that they light on fire, and then it just makes smoke, and it has a very distinct smell, and they use it a lot in ayahuasca ceremonies and things like that.
It's not
But so
frankincense.
no, I don't remember the word for it.
It'll come to you
But
later.
yeah, but so they'll do that, and they'll make a little ritual out of it. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. You don't have to bless people with crystals and stuff like that. But just to sort of set where we talk about psychedelics,
Yeah.
set and
Yep.
setting, right? So try to create the setting for a calm a calm atmosphere that allows people to share whatever they got going on. And if that's you, if you're hosting it, then you kick it off with whatever you want to talk about and see what happens. You know, it could be something good.
Yeah, I think it goes back full circle to the boom and the bust and the moving in and out of the tides. This I think that you and I are similar in our nomadic nature. Like we've picked up and we've left everything to go make our own way because that's what we were taught to do. You guys make your own way. But now you're seeing the regression of the tide and it's like, okay, us men that were nomads, we've went out, we've discovered. Now it's time for guys like us to come back and share with people, hey, here's what we learned.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's guys like us that should be starting the men's group. Maybe we are the closest things to our grandfathers. So it's up to us to show the younger guys. Maybe we're the older elephants. You know, maybe it's our
Yeah.
turn.
Yeah, and anybody thinking or watching this thinking, well, I don't have anything to share. Well, I guarantee you have something to
Yep.
share. Like you've been through something that other people haven't, or interpreted your experience in a certain way. And I think there's a real need for this. I think loneliness is just people are lonelier than ever, and men are bad at making connections. I mean, women are amazing at it. When I see
Yeah.
what my girlfriend does, she makes best friends with someone in 10 minutes. Is exchanging numbers and they already have plans to meet and stuff. Guys don't do that. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
like we don't want to be thought of as gay or something, or I don't know what it is, but guys just don't really do
Yep.
it. But
Yep.
they want it. They want it. Like almost all guys love to be invited to things, but they don't want to do the inviting.
Yeah.
So maybe, excuse me, I got a cough.
Yeah.
So yeah, why can't it be whoever's listening? Just be you. You can be that person to reach out. You can
Yeah.
surprise who shows up.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about influence and relationships and learning and yeah, it's sometimes I think about it from like a war standpoint because that's what guys do. If you look at the way like even colonialism or you look at the way battles are fought, like you send out sometimes you would send out like recon to go and check everything out and then they would come back. And it seems like if you look at our world as a giant war, all our societies like as a giant species of war, like we've gone out across the globe and we've sent people out there to fight and conquer. And now we're all coming back to talk about, okay, here's what I learned. Here's what we're doing. And it just seems like a good strategy to do. Kevin,
Can I ask you a question
yeah,
before
man.
you do
What do you
that?
got?
What
Yeah.
just like what have you? I mean, you read a lot about this kind of stuff, probably more than me in terms of ritual and things like that. Have you read
Yeah.
anything interesting about past rituals like that men would do for other men in certain cultures
Yeah.
that stuck out? Maybe?
Yeah. There's a really good book called Black Elk Speaks, and it's about this medicine man, and he talks I feel silly because I don't remember exactly what tribe he was from. However, he speaks a lot about the indigenous experience and what it was like for him. And in a weird sort of way, he was someone he was like the last medicine man from his tribe. And he was taught by an older, like his grandfather, not his father, but his grandfather. And so he was the guy that was given the keys to the rituals and the ideas. And the book is so beautiful and so inspiring, but also so sad because he's saying, I got no one to give the keys to. That's why I'm writing this book. That's why I'm telling that's why I'm telling everybody, here's the keys. Which one of you will hold them? Here's the keys. Which one of you will have the courage to stand up and do this? Because here is what happens when no one has the keys. Society around us falls. It doesn't matter that I'm an Indian. It doesn't matter what tribe I'm from. What matters is that we forgot the way to treat ourselves. And so when you ask me if I have read about men's groups, this was the ultimate man's group. It was this guy who came out and is telling the world, like, the time is now. Here's the keys. Here's me, an Indian guy writing a book. Like, we have oral traditions, but I'm trying desperately to reach out to whoever I can and using these methods that you guys use. So that's the one that comes to mind when I think about ritual. And he spoke about a similar sweat lodge, and he talked about the transformation of ideas. And the way he spoke about ideas was through a similar type of trip that he had about, seeing the eagles, seeing the animals, seeing his connection to nature, which I think is a big part of a man's group, is our connection to nature. In the world we live in today, a man is defined by how much money he makes. A man is defined by his consumption patterns, but nothing could be further from the truth. I know tons of men that make tons of money that can't even run a mile. What kind of a man is that? I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful, but if your body is at a point where it is breaking down, but you have tons of money, you should rethink what it means to be a man. You should rethink about some of these decisions that you've made, because it's probably not too late. How can you throw a ball with your child if you have millions of dollars, but your arm doesn't work? You've spent all your money, and I think you write about this in your book. You spend all your time working for an entity, a corporate person that doesn't care about you. You put all your time and your money and the best times of your life when you're a young man and you can be with your wife and you could be with your kid outside at a picnic or hiking or surfing or snorkeling. You're at a corporate boardroom talking about how do we give the illusion of productivity. That's not a man's group, damn it. That's not a woman's group. You should be out there doing something, like whatever it is, having your hands dirty in the garden. But yeah, thanks for asking that question, because I love to rethink of that guy's story. I'll send you the book. It's everybody should
send it to me, an audiobook.
Yeah, read it. It's awesome. It's something that will fundamentally change you if you let it. But I think there's tons of stories out there. Have you read some other rituals and things about men's groups?
There's an interesting book called Iron John, a book about men. However, I wish it would be more specific. So that's kind of why I asked the question. Like, I hear a lot about these rituals and what men used to do for other men. And in this book, it talks about, there's one thing that they do, and it involves pain. It's like the wound. And yeah, I won't do it justice, but check out that book. And they talk about the wound. So part of these initiatory rites involved, I think, the administering of a small wound to the boys. And I can't remember what it's supposed to be symbolic of, but I think it served as a reminder. And that was a key in a lot of them.
Yeah, shared pain, shared
check
sacrifice.
That one out, Iron John. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think in the book, I think it's in Black Elk Speaks, where he talks about the ceremony that the boys would go through. And it seems almost barbaric, like they would cut them and hang them so they were almost dead, and there's other stories about them dancing in the sun until they get to the point of dehydration and they fall. Like, that's the point. Like, you have to go till you almost die.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that death, like the simulated death that men go through. And then you understand another man. Only when you have seen another man in his worst moment and you have been through a moment like that can you identify with that person. And like the same thing we were talking about, how when I went through what I went through, that's how I can see other people going through it. That's the same thing when you've been through terrible things. Now you have this ability to see other people going through it. Like, that's what makes you a leader. That's what can make you a leader. That's what can make you a man, is that the shared tragedy is like, yeah, you went through it. So guess what? Now you can go help other people through it, and you can save them in a way. You can be the guy that when someone's down on the ground and they're crying because they've lost everything, you can be the hand that walks over to them and pulls them up. Like, I think
And
that
slaps
is
and be like, "Hey, you're fine." No,
yeah.
just kidding.
Hey,
Not
congratulations.
literally, but in tough
Yeah,
love
like
kind of way.
that's
Yeah.
one of the things that my mentors have done for me is like I'm crying like a baby sometimes, and they're like, "Hey, congratulations, man, you did it." And
Yeah.
you're like, "What? No, you don't understand. I've lost." Like, yeah, no, I do understand. And congratulations. Now you're one of us.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I this is a graduation ceremony, and that comes back to the wound that a lot of warriors, or even if you look at football players, they'll like have a brand on them. Like you think it's probably something dumb, but dude, these people went through a ritual. They went through a sacrifice where they seared this thing into their skin, and all of them have it, and all of
Hmm.
them have a story about how they got it. Maybe it's a story about your first love or the first. I tell my nephews, you're not a man until you've had your heart broken. Let me hear your story. Well, who was
Right.
the first girl that broke your heart? How did it happen? And I hope everybody has that story, because that is a rite of passage. Like, hey, congratulations, you made it through. You didn't kill
Mhm.
yourself. You didn't kill the other person. You made it. Congratulations. It hurt, didn't it? Well, now I got good news and bad news for you. The good news is that no one's ever going to break your heart like that again. And the bad news is no one's ever going to break your heart like that again. You know what I
True.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I hope it was beautiful, because it ain't going to happen like that again. I hope all those times where you thought that this person was the most beautiful thing in the world, hope you embrace that, because now you're scarred. Nothing can grow there. Something will grow there, but it won't be the same, man. It was pure,
Hmm.
wasn't it? It was
Yep.
beautiful. Think about that person, man. And find in your heart a spot for them, and always remember them. Remember the good parts and remember the bad parts, but that's the ceremony. Like, every day is a ceremony. Life is a ceremony. And if you can see those rituals, you can get through your day with passion. You can get through it and be like, can't believe this goddamn thing's happening to me. And then you'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm pretty lucky. Look at this thing. You can see it. And I was telling this guy yesterday on my route that I do, sometimes life will throw you, nothing hits harder than life. But sometimes when you're having the worst day, something beautiful happens. And for me, the other day, there's this little kid on my route. He's probably 4, little Japanese kid. And I've known him since he was 2, and he didn't even speak any English or when he was 2, And I remember last year, all he could say was, yep, yep. And this kid runs out of, when I pull up my truck, he runs out of his house and can be looking for me, waving. And I'll come over, I start talking to him. Hey, man, did you have a good day today? Yep. You want to see the back of my truck? Yep. You gonna eat lunch today? Yep. Hey, do you like race cars or trucks? Yep. Like, that's all he can say. But it's so damn cute. And like, I see him look at me, and like, he's so enamored by the truck, and his parents will come out, and like, but it just hit me like, God, man, I'm so focused on how silly or how things I don't like. But here's this new life in this world, and he's so excited that he just wants to interact with life. And it makes me look at my life and be how thankful for I am. And when I see, something because my kid died, whenever I see a little kid, especially little boys, man, like, I miss my son, man. And
Yeah.
I made a promise to myself, like, every time I see a kid, that's my son. When that kid runs out, that's my son. When I see a mom holding their baby, that's my son too. I'm going to try to do something for him. I always try to bring a little toy or a magic trick or something, like, show him. And a little part of me gets to imagine for a minute, hey, that's me and my son. That's me and my kid. And so this kid gets to live his life, and I get a little something out of there. But that's a ritual because of what happened to me. I had this moment, and now I get to share that moment and recreate that moment for other kids. And that kid will never know that I think he's my son, but I do, and a part of him is. And I get to be his dad. And I think that we can all have those experiences in life if you're willing to go through the pain and you're willing to understand life as a ritual. And I wish that I could share this with other men that are going to go through this. And I guess that's kind of what I'm doing now. So
Yeah.
thank you for letting me do it,
In
man.
one way, for sure. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful story.
Hey, man,
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thanks for letting me share it, man.
I guess a lot of it's just about bearing your chest,
It's so hard to
Strike
be
me
vulnerable.
down if you will, but
Yeah, I'm right here. I remember,
yeah.
remember that scene in Forrest Gump where Lieutenant Dan's like, "You call this a storm?" He's
Yeah.
like, I always think about that. Like,
For
when
sure.
things get bad, you just be like, this is nothing.
Laugh at death,
Yeah. And I sometimes, you see people out and about, people that you think might be crazy or homeless people just talking to themselves, and maybe they're laughing at the creator, like, man, this is nothing. I'll be homeless forever. What? This is nothing, but
It's nice to imagine that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably not that way, but maybe I think you can learn from everybody. And whether it's you manifesting your ideas onto someone else, whether it's you seeing yourself in that other person, I think there's so much out there that you can learn from if you're just willing to look at every situation like a learning environment. If you're vulnerable, like you said, if you put your chest out there, you're probably gonna get smacked. It's probably gonna hurt, but you're
You
probably gonna
definitely
learn.
get smacked.
You're gonna. I've been punched in the
For
face
sure.
a lot. I've been beat up a lot. But I think that's life. You get. How else do you know how far you can push it until you've been punched in the face enough times?
And I think that's what from what we were talking about before, that's what the wound is, right? You give all the men, they go through this experience in these rituals where they have a near-death experience where some of them like actually will poison boys to the brink of death basically and bring them back
Wow.
and then give them the
Yeah.
wound. But so much of these wounds we're just talking about, they're not physical wounds.
Right.
So if I see you've got a missing leg, okay, I see you had a wound, but if your emotional thing you went through, I can't see it on you. So I
Right.
think as I put that wound so that it's visible to other men and be like, oh yeah, yeah, you've been there,
Yeah, I think that this is a lot like the mystery schools. If you look back into the Pythagoreans, or even the Masons is sort of a mystery school. And
They have a death ritual, by the way, the
do they
Masons do.
really?
Yeah.
What's that look like?
It's basically it's like a death awareness thing,
Mm,
basically of your own death, and you're supported by brothers as you
yeah.
kind of like deal with it. It's good, powerful.
Of course it's powerful. Like
Mm.
that's these are the kind of things that, and it's probably the reason they want you to seek them out, because only when you seek them out do they know you're ready for the experience, right? Like, you can't just
Yeah.
go and pick someone off the streets and be like, hey, I'm going to take you in this ritual. But
Yeah,
they,
you can't teach anybody that anything they don't want to learn, right?
yeah,
It's like when the saying goes, right, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and then you've got to seek it out.
that
It's
says it
that
all right
simple.
there.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And I think that we're all that teacher, and you don't know who you're talking to. Like, you don't understand the person across from you may be a high-ranking official in some secret society you don't even know of, but they could be teaching you. It's weird how, like, the teacher shows up. The teacher shows up, and that means the student shows up, and that means that the teacher sees himself in the student, and the student sees himself in the teacher. It's this transfer of knowledge. That's what ritual is. That's the understanding behind it. Is like, I'm going to show you these beautiful, horrible things. If that makes sense,
Yeah.
and you're going to learn them. Congratulations, whether you want to or not. I've chosen you, or you've decided that on some level, you've decided that you want these trials. It's the same thing. I think it's the same thing with the Zen master, right? Like, anybody who goes to a psychologist ought to have their head examined. You know what I mean?
That's a great call. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. I've heard some interesting Zen koans and some interesting stories from people that wanted to go learn from a Zen master who was a horrible Zen master. Not that because they wanted that experience, and like, the guy's going to give it to you. He's going to throw stuff at you. He's going to punch you in the face. Like, that's what you want. Like, you want that. You went there.
What, they hit him with a stick or something?
Yeah, like, they do all kinds of, like, that's Zen. Like,
Mm.
you have it in you right now. You're already there. But if you want to go to the ashram and sweep up for 30 years, be my guest. You can do that. I heard a good story. I'll share it with you. It's that there was this Zen master, and he saw this promising young student he would be at the temple every day, and he would go and he would pray for 5 or 6 hours. And one day the Zen master comes down and he sees this young student who's praying, and he is focusing, and he is meditating. And the Zen master walks over to him and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, master, I'm meditating so that I can reach enlightenment. And the Zen master sits down next to him and he sees this brick, and he picks up this brick and he spits on it and he starts rubbing it with his hand. And he's just rubbing it. And the student's like, master, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm going to rub this brick until it turns into a diamond. And the student says, master, doesn't matter how long you rub that brick, it'll never turn into a diamond. And he goes, oh, so you do understand. And he walks away. You know what I mean? Like it's beautiful, but it's tragic. But that's the same thing that, like, they're showing you life. And some people need to have a master there to show them that. And the master's trying to snap you out of this idea that you need him. Like, you already have it. But if you need me to hit you with this stick, I will. I want you to get it. And sometimes, like, people mistake that stick for something else, you know, and they just stay there. And the more people stay there, the angrier the Zen master gets, because he's not getting through to you. And keeps smack him harder. Get out of here. You can't do it.
There's this thing people have about seeking authority elsewhere, right?
Yes.
And we are our own authority at the end of the day, but people like the illusion of being under somebody who knows what's going on.
Yeah. And some people never, whether through, some people don't graduate past that.
I think probably the majority.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's difficult to know that it's you. It's difficult to know all the good things that happen to you are you. It's difficult to know that all the bad things that happen to you, while simultaneously not your fault at all. Like, how do you square that? Like, that's hard, man. There's you.
Yep.
Right? And you reside in everybody else.
Excuse me.
It's all you. Every person you see, every event, it's you. You know, and all these books, like, I'm looking at all these books in my library. I'm like, how did I write all these? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
How'd they get here?
Yeah. Who wrote these? You know, and it's beautiful in some ways. And I'm thankful, man. I would talk to you, Kevin, and for everybody listening, the book is called Young, Successful, and Miserable. And it's a fascinating story. We've only begun to touch on the first couple chapters, but Kevin and I are going to be talking for the next few weeks about life, about the book, about how to make yourself better, and rituals. And I'm sure we'll be touching on things that have touched our lives and those around us that we care and we love and stuff. So that's what we got for today. I would go another hour, man. I gotta go.
Yeah, me too. And I'm also so low energy from the whole COVID thing. I'm sort of running out of steam today.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Me too. Well, I really enjoyed this, Kevin. I enjoyed talking to you, and I enjoyed the book, and I'm looking forward to our further talks. And I hope that people will take away from this the feeling I have right now. I hope there were some things that we said that can help other people. Where can people find you, and what is it that you hope people take away from our conversation today?
You can find me at kevinholt.me. My book is there for, I think, only audio, and PDF is there. If you want a physical copy, it's on Amazon, but I have no way to print them myself. I've also got a breathing course on that website. It's the fundamentals of breathwork, pranayama. The reason I put that on there is because if I feel like anybody who's trying to change anything, you got to start with your breath, because it's so many things come from your breathing and breathing correctly. And if you really want to surrender, like we were talking about, then that's sort of like step one, is you got to go fix your breathing. But you can check that out there. And basically anybody watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope something that we said resonates with you and makes your day just 10% better. You know, that's all I want.
Yeah, me too. I can't. I'm gonna take that course. I can't wait to download it and check it out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So I'll reach out separately.
Okay, well, hang on one second here. I'll end this broadcast and then I'll talk to you a little briefly and then I'll let you go. Everybody,
cool.
thank you so much for listening to Kevin and I. We're totally blessed that you're here listening to us, and reach out to both of us. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah,
That's
thanks,
what we got
guys.
for today. Aloha.